Hey everyone, welcome back to Be Not Afraid. I'm Carrie Bartholomew, otherwise known as Cara Marcel, depending where you watch me. And today I'm super excited. This has been probably a year in the making of trying to get in contact with Will, with life and everything. So, Will Reusch, am I pronouncing that right?
You are? Yeah, you got it.
Excellent. Will Reusch is an educator. Um, he's a critical thinking advocate, which to me, of course, is the most important thing. And he's the host of Cylinder Radio podcast. He spent nearly 2 decades teaching high school social studies in, wait for it, Los Angeles, including US history, civics, government, and economics. And what I'm really excited to do in this conversation is to talk to somebody who shares the same kind of values that I do, but doesn't necessarily, we don't see eye to eye on everything. Sometimes I'll watch something and I'll go, gonna have to make a comment,
Good.
but he
Yeah.
wants people to make comments. So,
Right.
Will, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, this is like my favorite thing to talk about. So let's go. It's an intersection of so many things of critical thinking and education and challenging ideas and just trying to get to the truth.
So, how did you get involved? I mean, as a public school teacher,
Yeah.
I always ask this question. Did something change? Did you start off in one way and everything was kind of like normal, and then the next day they handed you something and said, "Here's the new normal, deal with it"?
Kind of. It was a slow burn. So I taught public and private, and I moved to private in 2014. So it
Okay.
was kind of like right at the cusp of when things were starting to get crazy, like which was like 2015. Um, and the private school that I was at, it was a modern Orthodox Jewish school. So what I found was that a lot of the ideological stuff that was being pushed in schools, I was kind of immune to it because they already had an ideology. They had a religious structure that was resistant to kind of the ideologies that were happening out in the world, like these more secular ones, which I think is a lot of what is going on in the schools. Um, so it was more of a personal journey of having a lot of certainty. I knew it was right. I knew it was wrong. Had my politics all in line, and then I fell in love with a woman, my wife now, who was very different. She was the only non-white person in my entire family tree. She is an immigrant, and she was more politically conservative. She's an
Okay.
entrepreneur, and I was like, wait a second. I thought Republicans were bad. I thought they were bad people, and they didn't care. And then I met her family, and they would like bring in runaways, and they were very charitable, and they worked hard, and they really did a lot of self-sacrificial moves and stuff in their lives for other people. And I was like, uh-oh. And then my wife would have different ways because we're different in so many different, all the ways, kind of just culturally and everything, that from how you load the dishwasher to how we view the big stuff about guns and abortion and immigration and all that stuff. So I was like, wait, the person I love and respect the most on this planet sees these things differently than me. Maybe I'm missing something. And it got really curious. And then I went that direction, where I think what happens a lot right now, Carrie, is I use an example of Mr. Rogers all the time, because we all know Mr. Rogers. We love Mr. Rogers. And let's say that you don't like Donald Trump, okay? Or you don't like, wokeness, for lack of a better term. And Mr. Rogers shows up one day and he has an LGBTQ pin on or something, or he says, protect trans kids, or he wears a MAGA hat. You have really two choices. One is Mr. Rogers, the person I've known my entire life as a wonderful man, is not who I thought he was. Or this group of people that I've been kind of like programmed and according to my feed to believe to be wrong. Maybe they're not this entity that I think they are. Maybe they're not the evil ones that I've been told that they are. And it's shocking how many people go, Mr. Rogers is not the guy that I've known for 20 years.
Yeah. It's And I'm kind of wondering, how in the world did we get to that place? Because if you did grow up with Mr. Rogers, you did grow up um, with actual genuine kindness. That's how I see it. And that, I think, is where a lot of my principles come from. People will say, "Oh, you're just MAGA." I'm not. Like, I always tell people,
Yeah.
in a few years, the person in office will be out of office, but I'm still going to have my principles. I'm still going to have my values. I'm still going to choose to genuinely not hate people. And one of the things that I found so frustrating is this changing of language, right? So you'll have a word Like, take the Super Bowl this weekend. You'll have a word like, only love can stop hate.
Mhm.
And so many people get on board. Oh, that's great. That's a wonderful saying. And I'm like, yeah, unless you're the people that they're saying are hateful.
Yeah, yeah, define what hate means. I mean, that's the whole thing about hate speech. Is it
Right.
hate speech to say you hate the president? No. Is it hate speech to say that biological men cannot be women? You know, like,
Right.
yes. So
Yeah.
so is it, stating a biological scientific fact is hate speech, but saying literally the words, "I hate this person," is not.
Right.
That's gets really tricky.
Well, and even further than I hate, but I wish they were dead, and here's the way in which I would do that, right? And somehow that's not even considered hate because you are allowed to not tolerate those that you deem intolerant.
Yes. Yeah. There's a great, book by, Roy Baumeister, is a professor at, like, University of Central Florida or something like that, and it's called, Evil, and I've taught it for years in my class. It's like 4 main reasons why people do evil. For evil, just like, missing the mark, why they do things
Yeah,
that they know to be wrong, and it's like, um, one of them is ideological evil. Is it okay to punch someone? No. Is it okay to punch a Nazi? Yes. There's instrumental evil. It's like lying as a means to an end. A good, you can do bad things to get to a good end. Then there's sadistic pleasure. Sometimes it's fun to do bad things. That's like the troll kind of crowd.
right.
There's egotism, and then the fourth one's egotism and revenge, which is like, this person wronged me, so I can do bad things to them. And I have my students kind of track the thing when you've behaved this way or behave this way this week, like, write down which one it is. So they're aware,
I
because,
love that.
yeah,
Oh my gosh, that's a great idea.
well, people need to be aware that they can be the bad guys.
Right.
That's a big thing that I teach, in all my classes still online, is we look at the My Lai massacre, and you read the letters. That's in Vietnam. It was like this situation where these regular American soldiers did the absolute worst things that could possibly be done to other human beings.
Right.
And if you read the letters that they were writing the weeks prior to that to their families, they were normal guys just put in a really tough situation. But what we always say is like, well, I would never do that. I would never be a Nazi. I would never be, a hateful, person. And then that's what they said too. So we're all human beings, and that should be a uniting kind of idea that we are capable of doing bad things. And but if you're not aware that that you could possibly be the bad guy, you're not going to see it on your radar.
I love that you say that because in 2020, when the schools all got shut down, immediately it was funny because every year for my son's birthday, we would base his party based on a book, and we were doing Lord of the Flies. We were
Oh,
going to bring in a big pork and put it in our yard, and I mean
off
everything.
the
And
head.
we were just gonna let these these 12-year-old boys go crazy, and then give them the book. But when I was leaving and I started to realize that people would turn so quickly, right? So I was very involved in school. I was the volunteer drama teacher, and we just finished Willy Wonka. And everybody, like even the principal, oh, we love her, blah, blah, blah. And then I showed up at a reopen Washington protest and took a picture. And immediately I became public enemy, like immediately. And I just thought, how in the world? And that's when I started to realize, oh, this is how Nazis are made.
Mhm.
You have an idea in your head, and you think that anybody who does that idea is evil, and you can't understand. I lived in the area where it's, everybody works for Microsoft and Google. We didn't. Us being shut down meant, will we be able to pay our mortgage? Right?
Yeah.
And nobody could understand that conversation. Or take a few months later, George Floyd.
Yeah.
Nobody could understand why I wouldn't want a lot of people delivering pies to my house and saying, "We feel so bad for you." And I was just like, "But that's not my identity." And I lost a lot of friends over that because a lot of friends had been told that that was the way to be kind.
Yeah.
Not to
Well,
listen to a different point of view, right? And I feel like the Nazis weren't always the Nazis.
yeah.
They were neighbors of other people, and then they were taught a lot of gross things.
Propaganda works.
Propaganda, exactly. And when I say gross, I'm thinking about, like, the Jewish math
Mhm.
problem, right? Like, just really awful things about your neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah, people you've known.
Right.
And that happened, that's been happening now. It happened, during COVID and George Floyd stuff, but then it just kind of happens with everything now.
Right.
Is, people stop talking to their parents. I have a friend who been friends with him for over a decade, and he's like, I can't be friends with you anymore. I was like, why? He's like, because what you posted about ICE. And if you follow my accounts and stuff, well, like, I'm not promoting, I'm just like posing questions.
I know.
He's like, you can't be indifferent to this. I was like, I'm not even indifferent. I'm just like saying that this is complicated. He's like, the fact that you think it's complicated is enough for me to cut a friendship. Like, I think we're human beings are tribal. We're tribal creatures. So we have this element in us going back to our earliest days of an us versus them to protect our own. And that, I think, comes up. There's healthy ways to be tribal, like the Super Bowl. My team's going to beat your team, and yeah, it's fun, but then it can always devolve into something a lot more serious. So I think we always look at that. Human beings are very tribal, but they're also very collaborative, and I try to lean more into the collaborative nature of human beings more so than not. But when you said about people ask these questions like, how could you support this, and how could you do this, how could you vote for that person? Those are rhetorical questions. They're not actually looking for answers. And what I try to promote is actual questions, because you are curious. For my friends who are like very, very anti-Trump, they don't understand it. So if you don't understand something, ask questions. Like,
Right.
we're all ignorant about a million things. What you know about the world is so small. So why not lean into that curiosity? And that's been kind of my superpower as an educator, as a father, and as just like a general thinker. I think for most of my life is I recognize it's very Socrates-ish. I'm not Socrates, but it's like, or Einstein, where he says, I'm nothing, I have no special talents, I'm just passionately curious. And Socrates asked a lot of questions. And I was like, well, I can do that. Like I'd be in rooms and I'm like, I'm not the smartest guy here, but I can be the most curious one here. And then eventually you keep asking questions and remembering the answers and not following. And then eventually your questions get higher and higher level. And you turn around and you go, I actually know a lot about this. Interesting.
Right. And the more that we ask questions, I think the more we unify, the more we humanize each other. And I think that's also a reason why we're being asked to not, or being told to not. I don't know if you know much about ethnic studies and.
A bit, yeah. Here in California, there was a thing in a push for ethnic studies, and I had one of the main, I forget her name, on my podcast, one of the main like architects of the ethnic studies curriculum here, and I helped contribute with some organizations to write alternative ethnic studies programs and stuff, because it's not what it sounds like it is. Like a lot of the stuff you talk about, language stuff is labeled a certain way, gender affirming care,
love,
like
hate,
whatever it is, it sounds good. Help the orphans.
Right.
In a third world country, but it's actually a sweatshop. It's like, like how things get labeled really matters. Ethnic studies sounds great. Let's learn about different ethnicities. And that's actually not what it is.
No, in fact, ethnic studies, was it Kathleen Sleater that you're talking about?
Yes, that's what I had on my, I had her on my.
You had her on. Oh my goodness. See, you are more evolved than I am, because I listen to her and I go, no way in, no, because I think it's so damaging. So maybe that's the place. But here's the thing. So I read the California model policy, and I actually had access to the original curriculum that was coming out to teach the stuff that's in California right now. Mm-hmm. So I had access to it. And a few things that I found that really bothered me. The first one was that every child is supposed to see why they are oppressed.
Yep.
So
yep.
I have a massive problem with teaching kids that the future isn't bright. I really do. And that doesn't mean that I want to, sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, right? It just means, like, I'm going to talk to my kids, and when I talk to them about Black History Month, I'm going to say, okay, so you guys have been taught that you're oppressed and that the world is just a terrible place and it's never progressed. But if it hasn't, I wouldn't be your teacher.
Yeah.
That's a fact, right? And so the first one is that they're all oppressed, and the second one is how they're supposed to dismantle the systems of oppression. And when Kathleen Sleater talked, she said, do not think of ethnic studies as a culture club of the month. That is not the goal here. Ethnic studies must be seen through the lens of critical race theory, Meanwhile, everybody was saying, "Oh, critical race theory would never be in schools." You know, they were gaslighting insanely.
Yeah.
So what do you know? I mean, you had her on. What did you learn? And I mean, how could you
Yeah, I mean, I had her on in this span during that time. I had, I also had James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian on,
Mhm.
who were kind of I had two National Teachers of the Year who were both very strong advocates for critical social justice. So again, I mean, it's cylinder radio, so it's the idea of like a cylinder, like its different shapes,
Right, yeah.
and I get really curious. I think that it's a bunch of different things. I think that Christy, was it Kathleen Slater? What was her first name? I forget.
I thought it was Christine.
Maybe it's Christine.
I've got a video. It
Yeah.
doesn't have a nice title. It's
No,
called
it's
Straight
fine.
from the Horse's Mouth. So
She was an older lady. Yeah, she was an older lady. She was like kind of back. She was teaching like when it was a little bit more egregious, where like, schools didn't teach anything about like Black history. Like there's a lot of schools that don't teach about like Black Wall Street, and
right. I
and
didn't
like,
know about it.
so there, it is important to teach that. But
Yes.
the problem of critical race theory, and the way I've explained critical race theory is like, go back to Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw and everything. It's like people, I was one of the only active classroom teachers that was speaking out against it. So I went on, Fox News and Glenn Beck and all these different programs, and they were like, it's just nonsense. And I was like, it's actually not all nonsense,
Okay.
because it serves a good purpose of, let's put on these lenses to see, is there discrimination under the surface? I think the war on drugs would be a good example, because you look at what John Ehrlichman said when he was the advisor for Nixon. It's like, this is a way to lock up hippies and Black people. And then you look at the incarceration rates and the conviction rates, and it's working out. There's a Bay Area a Supreme Court case from back in the day, Yik Wo versus I'm not even sure, but it was essentially these like Chinese laundromats. The Chinese immigrants were coming into San Francisco, and they were having laundromats in buildings that weren't made of brick. And so all of the white laundromats, they were, and laundry owners, they didn't like that the Chinese were undercutting their prices and everything. So they pushed for policies to get them out, saying you needed to pay additional fees if you weren't in a brick laundromat. So basically, it was a way to be discriminatory on the books without saying we don't want Chinese people. So critical race theory is great for that. You go, wait a second, is this racism? Put on these lenses. Look for racism everywhere. Maybe it's here. Then you take the lenses off. You got to take the lenses off. And the problem is not identifying possible discrimination. It's that you don't challenge it once you make the hypothesis. When Michelle Obama said she was like getting ice cream with her daughters, she had a hoodie on, and a white man just butted in front of her because that's what white men do to Black women. It's like, maybe, but maybe he just butts in front of everybody. Like, it's just a hypothesis starter, and in the scientific method, hypotheses are supposed to be challenged to see if they're true or not. And that's the problem. It's not necessarily even that critical race theory is being done. It's that it's the only lens that the kids are taught to look at. And then also, in addition to all that, is the system's broken. They can't even define what a system is or whatever it is. You're always oppressed. They don't give you a pathway out. So right. What do I do to be less oppressed? Do I show up to things on time? Do I work really hard? Oh no, those things are categorized as whiteness.
Right.
They don't do that either. So now the kids feel really hopeless.
Right.
Trying to identify problems, but then give solutions.
And there are no solutions, because this is part of the theory crowd, yeah. Right? And the theory crowd is constantly breaking things down, always dismantling. There is no end. I had
either. It's
right,
preserving epistemic pushback.
Right? Yeah, I had somebody who asked me at the very beginning, Carrie, where does this all end? What's the point here? And I said, I think it's global communism. And
she's like, that's the aim.
She could not handle that, right? She's like, oh, no. And now we're in the I told you so phase.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to watch this. And even now, I think now it's actually sadder, because I think people do see it and they're so afraid. We have some initiative going on here, and a friend had just called me before we jumped on, and she said that her husband was trying to get this initiative, and somebody said, I can't sign it because when they win, they're going to come after us.
Scary.
It's a scary place to be. And what I'm really concerned about, and this is the place where you and I differ, I think, somewhat, because I do think that you said you do support children's rights to protest. Is that
Children,
correct?
yeah, I'm okay with kids. Well, it depends like what age and over what, but yeah, I think the idea of exercising protest is fine. Yeah, yeah, let's talk about it.
So I worry about multiple things. One, I live in the town where Furrygate happened a couple of years ago.
I don't even know what that is, but I can use my imagination.
It's where the kids were told that they had to be an inclusive school, and kids who were chewing on sticks and running down the hallway on all fours, you had to accept that, but other kids weren't allowed to even chew gum. And so the kids, after complaining and saying this isn't fair, they, on their own, took to the streets. Okay.
Mm.
That's what happened, but it went massively viral and it ended in 5 days of bomb threats because that's what happens when one side doesn't like what kids are protesting for.
Yeah.
Now we have ICE protests and counter protests. And the counter protests, I saw the Confederate flag running through my town. And my thing is escalation.
Yeah.
Also, teachers who support some and not others.
Yeah, double standards for sure.
And but really that escalation, what happens when, we're an open carry state. So what happens when somebody who is doing nothing, minding their own business, gets a rock thrown in their car window?
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like, and the other thing is that when we say kids in their civic duty, how many today know what that even means?
Yeah.
Right?
Civics, yeah.
So if they don't understand what it means to be civically responsible, and part of that is to understand the issue, not just to write a sign that says one thing, but to actually understand the issue. And that's the problem. In this ethnic studies book that's in California now, and now it's out, so I can say it, it's called Voices. In this ethnic studies book, it actually says children should be taught to lean into pathos and ignore logos. In school.
Yeah, of course.
You're not shocked by that. I'm so shocked by that.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, so my son is a senior this year, and he was lucky enough to go to a charter school that was like Hillsdale. So, but only until 10th grade. At 10th grade, it only goes up to 9th grade, right?
Okay.
So, and they were taught, like they read original sources. They were taught to think. When the kids were given Black History Month, the kids were given Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois debate.
Oh, great.
As a paragraph each, and then they were supposed to decide who they stood for. Okay.
Yeah, I teach that even in like my Patterdox American history class. So I think there's a really, it's like okay, the game's rigged against you, because Patterdox is my online education platform. It's all about pattern recognition, right? So it's like, okay, the game's rigged against you. We're two options: play the rigged game, even though it's unfair. Win, show a good effort. That'll get you the respect, the wealth, whatever, and then you can start to change the system. Or refuse to play. I'm not playing this rigged game. Change the rules and then play. Like, it's not clear cut like which one's better or the other, but getting kids to think about like, what do you do in that situation? It's not really even about them at the time and civil rights. It's really about just like how you apply these civil rights lessons and patterns to your own life when you're going to be in a rigged game. It could be at work or whatever it might be.
I love that.
There's so much there to learn from, and I think that's what's really important about history and everything. So the appeal to the emotional side. I'm reading Screw Tape Letters because we're like a Jesus household. So like, we're reading the Screw Tape Letters right now with my sons, and I don't know if you read it with C.S. Lewis. It's so good.
Oh yeah.
And it just really over and over and over again about how the enemy, the devil, demons, it's all keep the people appealing to emotion.
Right.
It's just you're so easily manipulated by emotions, and that happens on the left and the right. This idea that only one side is emotional, that's clearly not the case. But also, I think it's like, how could just sticking with like the woke people, lack of a better term, it's a pejorative term, but like, can they be so vicious? It's the flip side of empathy. empathy exists in us so that we can care for the vulnerable. So when our baby's crying, we feel their pain and we want to protect them.
Yeah.
The mother bear is the most dangerous animal in the woods because of its empathy. So if you view someone as marginalized or helpless, you will be vicious, tear their face off. And there was a Glennon Doyle, I think, is like a writer and activist and stuff. She had a image of like a mountain lion with a bunch of cubs behind it, like growling, and it said, "Leave trans kids alone." And it was like, it's so on the nose of like, yes, that's exactly what it is. That's the way
Right.
it is. And asking a question like, do you think it's good to put hormones or give surgeries? Like I had Chloe Cole on my podcast, and
That's
her
awesome.
story I was holding back tears the whole time. It's
Right.
you where's your empathy for her? The one-sided empathy as opposed to universal empathy is a whole other thing. But they clearly go back to like the tribal then nature of protecting the vulnerable, even if they're like, well, I'm not the vulnerable. Please don't protect me. It's like, no, I got you. It's that like maternal, paternal kind of
I'm
thing.
reading Rules for Radicals Defeated right now. And because I'm not going to read Rules for Radicals itself, simply because I'm not really interested in something dedicated to Satan.
Yeah.
But that's but it does have all of the rules listed. And absolutely it's dualism.
Yeah.
So if they're on your side, they can do no wrong. And that's how come we can't have conversations about people who have been assaulted or worse
Yeah.
by illegals. We're
Yeah.
not allowed to have those conversations. We're not allowed to mention them. We're not allowed to mention when African Americans harm other African Americans. Can't be mentioned,
Yeah.
right? Because this side is righteous. So I would love to hear what your definition is of woke.
Yeah. So I think boiling it down, I think it's essentially, critical social justice. I think it is seeing the world. Let me see if this makes sense. Seeing the world through an oppressor and oppressed lens. I think that's
Okay.
if you structure everything as the oppressor versus the oppressed, then it works with a whole bunch of things when it comes to gender. Who's the oppressor? Who's the oppressed? When it
Right.
comes to race, it even comes to tricky issues like Israel. Okay, so that's like a real hot button topic too. Because you can kind of go both angles, but you could say that like Israel, because of their military power and their wealth and the power that they have connected to the West, that they are the oppressor. And then the Arab world, even though they have far more land and numbers and whatnot, that they are the oppressed. And when you see that, then what you get is this kind of like, I guess Gad Saad calls it suicidal empathy. I've also heard it said as toxic compassion. I just watched a news story yesterday, and I posted about it, where this violent kidnapping rapist guy, he's like 24 years old, was in a courtroom, and the jury found him guilty and sentenced him to 65 years. And then the judge just single-handedly reduced the sentence in half. And he was, to say like non-repentant would be putting it lightly. Like he was cursing at the judge, saying he doesn't care, turned to the woman the young girl that he raped and said, "I'll see you in 20 years. Like horrible, scary stuff. But the judge was like, you are, you're a black man in this society and you never got a fair shake. So I'm going to reduce your sentence. And like, I have that like feeling too of like, wow, what happened to this young man to get him to be this way? And that like makes me like sad. And I hope that he can get the help that he needs and whatever it might be. But there's also like a dangerous element of this, that we just let people do these things that are actually hurting others. Like it's actually hurting a lot of kids. I've had 3 or 4 detransitioners on my podcast who are kind of bamboozled into this way of thinking. That's their narrative. And ironically, the transgender community is saying, well, you're denying your true self. You know what I mean? It's like,
yes,
because the blinders are so egregious. And I guess I like, as much as I understand it, I've read Jonathan Haidt's Righteous Mind, and I understand the social psychology of it. I just got so deep because I was like, I don't understand how this happens. So then I learned the science, and I'm like, I get it, but I don't get it. Like I know it, but I still don't understand. It seems like such a bad life approach to be so
that's perfect.
anti-serious.
That's perfect. I think about just what you said, the help that you need. We were foster parents
Mm.
for years, and all of the sudden, the help that they need turned into trauma-informed care, i.e., no responsibility. Kids aren't held to any kind of responsibility, and then my own background is I grew up and aged out of the foster system.
Oh.
So, I kind of understand what works. I kind of understand that there has to be a point where you say, "Yep, all of this stuff happened and it was really awful, and also if I continue to stay there, I'll never be anything else with my life." And nobody wants to have those conversations. Excuse me. Nobody wants to have those conversations, one, because they're not lucrative, and two, because then you can't manipulate somebody with compassion.
Mhm.
And what I have found is so many of the people who claim to be compassionate are some of the least. But I wanted to, how I see woke is
Yeah.
enlightenment. People believe that they are the only people with the right ideas. And this is how come personally I tend to lean more into the James Lindsay Camp than not, because um because I do believe that there is a woke right, because it's people
I do
who
too.
believe fully
Yeah.
that if you don't follow them 110%, they should kick you out and crush you. Exactly the way that the left does. Which is why so many classical liberals say, "I'm homeless."
Yep.
Because
Politically homeless. I'm stealing that. That's great. I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
yeah, and that's
I
why
see it. They don't. I see what's really going on.
exactly.
Yeah.
And really, utterly, like, they spend their time trying to crush each other.
Mhm.
And I'm sitting there going, I'm looking at the time. I'm looking, quite frankly, I'm looking at midterms and I'm going, it's a lot of really bad things that are going to get put right back into place in terms of gender ideology things,
Mhm.
in terms of racial. You are now the main person, but I don't want us to be South Africa. And as I watch South
Yeah.
Africa, do you pay attention to what's going on there?
And with what in
South
particular?
Africa, they did a lot with equity, and their equity is
Trying to make up for the apartheid, like, make amends for.
yes, but there's a lot of people, and I've spoken to some. Um, the people from South Africa are honestly scared to talk. A lot of them, so I talk to them in person, and then
Mm,
I, try to translate what they're
mhm.
saying. But because it's so brutal, you know, kill the boar is a real thing,
Yeah.
right?
I've seen that, like, at soccer games or something like that.
Yeah, where they're
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
massive stadiums standing there, but they're also there've been places where they've taken old women and put them in bathtubs and shot them with nail guns. I mean, because they've been taught so much hate, and I feel fortunate, even though I grew up in a hard circumstance, I never fell for the DEI language because I'm like, I'm half of both things.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to hate a part of myself because you told me to, you
Yeah,
know?
well, my wife brought that up because when all that was happening, and, like, the CRT stuff in 2020, 2021, is there was a lot of, like, white men are bad, and she would have her friends who are, like, in the Filipino community be like, "Yeah, see, white men are bad," and she's like, your kids are half white. Same thing you're saying. It's like, my kids are
Right,
half white. Like, no, like, I don't want them to think that part of them is bad. And that's the same way that I'm sure it was a generation or two ago. I'm sure now too, some places, but of like, if you're half black, like half of you is bad, or half Filipino, that's the bad part. Like,
right,
no, like,
right.
what's going on here?
So, I mean, and I think that that may have been the way that it was in schools. I know that one thing they thought is that if you were mixed or if you were a foster child, so I had both, that you were slow, that you couldn't learn.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things where I'm like, why would you not just evaluate by putting a test in front of someone?
Right.
But you can't, because that will destroy your narrative.
Yeah.
And watching that watching the worst ideas become adopted as the best has
Mm.
been the what I always say, and what I do at the very beginning of the year with all of my students is we reenact the emperor's new clothes.
Interesting. Yeah. So I had um Alana Redstone on my podcast a while ago, and I worked with her a little bit at the Mill Institute. She's great. She had a class that was called "Bigots and Snowflakes: Living in a World Where Everyone Else is Wrong." and, and I remember
What was the name of her class? Was it for kids?
Yeah, no. She was taught at the university level.
Oh, okay.
A sociology professor. She's awesome. But
wow. Okay.
Deep like critical thinker. And I brought up the Emperor's New Clothes a lot because I was like, how? Because it was all this. This probably before that. It's probably 2019 or something. And I was like, how do we start to get people to see this? And I was like, is it a little bit the Emperor's New Clothes? Do you need a few people to be that kid to be like, he's naked? Like he's naked. Come on. Like you need some people to kind of stick their neck out. And we saw that with all kinds of things. We saw that with COVID. We saw that with racial stuff. We saw it with transgender stuff. And then, I saw it in education because I was talking about this stuff when I started my podcast and my Instagram in 2018. So in 2018, I'd already been seeing it in the K through 12 system. And I was like, this is happening not just to Jordan Peterson, Nick Kostakis, and Brett Weinstein on the university level. It's happening before that. And I was like screaming at the top of my lungs about what was happening in K through 12. And it was like nothing. And then finally, because of COVID and people going online, then it started to get ramped up and everything. But there was like a good 2 years there where I was like, no one seems to be talking about this. What's going on? I was like the only one. It's the way it felt. And if I found some teacher somewhere that did, I like right away wrote to like, oh, hey. But it was, and now I think there is more of like a faction of people who are aware of this, more homeschooling, more people talking about it. But for a while there, it wasn't. And I was just so curious that I was like, if I'm saying something that's problematic, luckily I was in a position that my school would get letters to my school saying like, you employ a racist, sexist, homophobe, anti-Semite, whatever it is. But they knew me. The families like me. The kids like me.
Teaching at a Jewish school?
Yeah.
Okay.
They just knew it was nonsense.
Right.
So they were able to just crumble it up and throw it away.
Right.
But I understand that a lot of teachers were not. If I would have been still at the public school, I would have gotten fired 100%. And I probably would have been too scared to speak up. So I'm not blaming for the teachers who didn't speak up because, I have 3 kids and 2 grandmas living with us. And it's a lot.
Okay. So when I agree. I mean, it's really hard. I was just in Florida and I got, it's funny that you said the Mama Bear stuff because I got the Mama Bear Award. And, but when I was talking, I just said, the thing is that I needed to be around the people who have courage because so many people don't. Yeah. And I don't hate them for not having courage. I don't think I hate anyone. There are people though that I have dismissed and that even in my Christian worldview, I am like, I am not the person to sow seeds for them. Mm. And I don't know that that's the right way to be, but it is where I'm at because when you look at family members and family members say you really need to know your place, you need to understand your plight.
Yeah, and you try to preach the gospel, and if they don't want to hear it, then you dust your feet off, you move on. You can't like that. That's scripturally accurate. Is like if you're just yelling it into an abyss. If you don't believe that it's going to get any movement, then you need to move on to people that will.
Right.
Because your time is finite.
So what happened in public school? What were the signs that you first saw that you were like, oh, this is not where I can stay?
A lot of it was the structure. It wasn't the political stuff. It was the structure of the school being one where you had to teach this way. You had to teach the standards. I would have kids who were very curious about just all kinds of stuff. And I was like, sorry, I can't address your curiosity because I have to get to this for standardized tests. It was just very like test focused. I had 48 kids in my class and it was like in East LA. It was a tough area, 48 kids. And I was the only teacher. It was just, I just felt like I wasn't able to teach the way that I wanted to teach. Like I'm one of those, definitely not every teacher, but I'm one of those teachers that like my principal, my administration can just be like, all right, happy first day of school. We'll see you in June. Go do your thing. And I would just go, you know what I mean? Like I didn't need
I so know what you mean.
I didn't need anyone cracking the whip. Like I was on it, Yeah. I just needed to find an environment that was like that. But what I was noticing because I was still friends with a lot of people in public school, and there were still elements of it kind of percolating even in the private schools, and I had friends in private schools and even the school outside, is the double standard of the way that political candidates were treated. So a kid wore like a MAGA shirt. to school. And this is in 2016. So now it's like not as crazy because he's been two-term president and stuff and won the popular vote and everything, but like still obviously controversial. But the teachers were all gathered in the teacher lounge, like, who's going to tell him to take off that shirt? How can he wear that shirt? And I was like, whoa, what do you mean? It's like, he's a valid candidate. He's the top candidate for the Republican Party. Like, let's go talk to him. Let's ask him questions. And I started to see that. I started to see like this idea of teachers saying we need to teach the kids morals. And I said, what morals? Like, where do you get these morals from? Whose morals exactly?
Whose morals? Yes.
Okay. It's like there are these like ideas that there's only one way to be. I know in my heart what is right or wrong. It's like, so did Hitler. You know what I mean? Like, so if you're not willing to have these kinds of challenges, and I would engage with my peers, the other teachers, about just like asking questions. A gun issue would come up, and I would like, they would say like, isn't it crazy that you can just walk into any store and buy an automatic weapon and walk out? I was like, that would be crazy. It's not true. Like, what do you mean? Like, and I just would ask these questions, and the teachers I would realize that they didn't have any idea what they were talking about. An early example would be also, we talk about activism, circling back to that, is there was a school shooting. So the kids organized a walkout, which is like what's happening now with ICE, right? So they had a walkout. The teachers were all like, yes, this is wonderful. Went outside, they were playing the guitar, again, down with, gun violence. And they were all like, see, Mr. Reusch, you taught us about activism, because, we teach about civil rights activists as heroes, and they want to be heroes. So they're all like, and I just had this face on that was like, and all the teachers were coming up to me like, oh, isn't this wonderful? Because I was the civics teacher and I was the history teacher. Isn't this wonderful that they're doing this? And I was like, yeah, we'll see. So after it was done, it was a bunch of like 11th and 12th grade girls, and they came up and they were like, Mr. Reusch, it wasn't this great? You're teaching us to be activists. I said, okay. I said the Ross Perot quote, the activist is the one who cleans up the river, not says the river is dirty. So I said, I had a baby at home at the time. I was like, look, I got a baby at home. My life's crazy, but here's what I'll do. You care about gun violence? Any gun violence? Like, yeah. I was like, okay, here's what I'll do. I'm going to stay after school with you today. From school ends at 3:30. I'll stay from 3:30 to 7:30.
Wow.
Tomorrow, same thing. Friday, same thing.
Wow.
Monday, same thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a lot of deep research. And then we're going to sit down and we're going to find a solution. We're going to write legislation. And then after we write that legislation, we're going to get on the phone and we're going to get on the emails and we're going to send it to all of our representatives, and we're going to grind and we're going to get some legislation into California and into, Congress and the Senate. What do you say? And they just went like, I have volleyball practice. I have practice. I was like, okay, so let me get this straight. You care enough about gun violence to skip algebra class.
Right.
That's how much. So when I talk about like I support protests, like part of that is the cost. Martin Luther King was arrested 29 times, beaten.
Yeah.
They were beaten, spit upon. They were there was a cost to that. And I think the problem with activism now with young people is, what's the cost?
Right.
Like, there has to be something that you're willing to sacrifice.
No, it's actually a reward.
Yeah.
There is a centering around if you are protesting for the right things.
It's the opposite. Like all of those people, who are in the foot soldiers, the kids, even in the 60s and stuff, who were marching down in the South, like they were taken to jail. Like that wasn't like a glory. Now we look back, we're like, wow, that's really cool. Like someone says like my grandma was arrested as like, a freedom rider or something like that. It's like, wow, she's a hero. But at the time, it's super embarrassing. It's bad. You could lose your job. If you look at the Montgomery bus boycott, like they had to walk or ride a bike in the rain. Like they gave something up because they believed in it. It's, if you incentivize and you reward people for it, then it changes all the incentives away from actually bring about the change that you want. So when I say I support protests, it's like in the idea of like, first of all, cleaning up the river, not just saying it's dirty, not just pointing at it, but doing something about it, but also like willing to take the hit. Like, are you willing to take the hit?
Well, what about the deep dive? Because my students, excuse me, my throat is just a mess. What I do at the beginning of the year with my high schoolers is I ask them what triggers you, when I give them all Sharpies and I tell them go write on the whiteboard, not Sharpies.
One time.
but I tell them go write on the whiteboard what triggers you. And I tell them, I look at their list and I say, this is our syllabus. Okay, so for the next 2 weeks, we'll be covering the civil rights movement. Now that does mean some unlearning of things that we've learned before.
Mm.
Okay, so learning things like most people, if they talk about the civil rights movement, they're going to mention two people. Who would they be?
Martin Luther King, Malcolm X?
Well, I want to say Rosa Parks, but
Rosa.
yeah.
Right.
Okay, so it would be those two people. Here's just one example that I learned this week. Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. Um, he needed certain imagery, and he believed in what's by any means necessary. So he went out, took a bunch of his words, blacks, to the symphony. Have you heard this story?
I don't think so.
Okay, so he takes a bunch of blacks to the symphony. They go in, and before they go in, he gives them all cans of pork and beans to eat. So they go in to the symphony, and what happens when you eat a can of cold pork and beans. People get up, leaving, more than likely looking aghast, probably plugging their nose, whatever else. And they get the imagery that what we've always been shown is that this imagery is they're appalled to be around Black people.
I've never heard of this. So wait, so these images exist now of like people?
I haven't looked for the images yet. I'm just reading this chapter.
Wow, I've never heard that.
But see, that's the thing. The things that we've never heard. Do we address those with kids? I mean, how I address it is I send their parents an email and I say, this is what we're going to be discussing in class. And what I always tell the students is I can only teach you as much as I know. You know, but one of the things I love Peter Boghossian, and one of the things that I have on my wall is how can I be less wrong more often? And so to me, that's how we teach. We have to teach with this place of intellectual humility. I don't know. When we talked about Bad Bunny on Monday, I had some kids who aren't even in my class walk in wanting to know what I was going to talk about. And they're like, because he had amazing moves. And I'm like, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. And they're like, what? And I said, no, but I am going to ask the question, who is he saying hates? What hate is he trying to drive out?
Yeah.
You guys go with that one, you know, and then they talk, but it's hard. I had a parent say, hey, I learned some things about Martin Luther King that I didn't know. What are your thoughts on this? And I'm like, oh, honey, it's not an email. Want to go to lunch?
Yeah, like a lot of like the personal life stuff.
Yeah, the personal life, but also there's arguable proof that he was a socialist.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't support socialism. I know too many people who've come here from other countries seeking something better than that. And so knowing that he was a socialist, there's a lot of people who argue whether or not he was a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, that same conversation comes with the founding fathers.
Yeah.
Were they all Christians by what we would call Christians today? Some might argue, I would argue that some of them at least were more of progressive Christians.
Yeah. And Thomas Jefferson, especially. Yeah.
Yeah. So we look at these people and and it's hard. It's hard to critically think, and it should be exciting. Right?
Yes. But like, I can talk about any of these topics forever because you just pull apart the nuance, just unpeel the onion. I love intellectual humility. I've made these 3 pillars for interacting that I apply at Patterdox, but also online, which is intellectual humility, genuine curiosity, and grace. And I think if you engage with people with those 3 things, I think you come out ahead. Peter Boghossian, he's a friend of mine. You know, we trained jiu-jitsu together. I just worked on a psychological experiment with him.
You need to tell him to come pay attention to a little podcast that gets very few watches.
Yeah. I'll show clips and stuff like that. Yeah, I can fairly commonly or often. But he, he's an atheist. He wrote a manual for creating atheists. You know, and I'm like a born again Christian. It doesn't matter. He just did a big podcast with Frank Turk. It doesn't because we have the same mindset of like trying to seek truth.
Right.
Now we're going to challenge and we're going to disagree. And I love the fact that you and I disagree. And hopefully I'm going to disagree with a lot of people. We don't want to all be in lockstep in agreement. We just want to disagree better and have a common like desire to understand.
Be so careful with those words. My governor uses that word and disagree better. Disagree better in Utah means do exactly what we tell you to do, Like you can say your point, but at the end you better be obedient to us.
Yeah. So back to the language issue, right?
I live in a social experiment, so
Yeah. Peter and James, they wrote a book, How to Have Impossible Conversations. It's really good too. You know, like there's so many different elements that, and one I apply a lot is like, you know, he does it in his street epistemology stuff of like, you know, hypothetically, what information could I present to you? What data could I present to you that could get you to change your mind? If they say nothing, then, well, then your beliefs aren't actually based on logic. They're not based on data. So they're just a feeling thing.
Emotion.
Yeah. So it's just an emotional thing. So it's okay, but like you should recognize what it is. Because there's things that I believe that aren't really measurable in a lab. Like I don't think there's any proof that you could show me that says that I don't love my son. Well, here's a video of you yelling at him, or here's this when you know, like no, like I just know it. Okay, but that is a different claim. That is more of a metaphysical claim than like, you know, a claim based on like evidence of, you know, that of like a politician that you like or dislike. But if it's like, hey, I hate Donald Trump, nothing can change my life on my mind on this. Okay, but you should recognize that that's what it is then.
Right.
That is like more of like an emotional faith kind of commitment, and it's not illogical. And a lot of people think it's logical, and it's actually not. I teach apologetics too, and like a lot of the apprehensions that people have towards faith, it's actually, they might say it's logical or evidence based, and it's really not. It's really like the idea of repentance or changing your life is just like really uncomfortable. You know, sometimes people have gone so far in the direction of being anti-Trump. You're too late now. You know, or the other direction. You know, maybe like someone's like so hardcore Trump, and all their friends are like, he's bad, and you're like, no, he's not. That now you're seeing some of the stuff going on. You're like, I kind of want to change directions, but I can't because I've established my like, I stuck my flag in the ground here, and now I have to stand by it. And I just want to be fluid with like where I stand. You give me new information, and I'll change. Interesting. Yeah, let's go. Keep updating my software.
That's what I mean by exciting, because you have to get to that point. My podcast used to be called Martin's Daughter because I wanted to be the new generation of unifying people. And then I learned that Martin Luther King and I probably had a lot of values we didn't agree with.
Yeah.
So, in fact, the only thing I can think of is one day my little children will be seen for the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
Yeah.
But when you know, I mean, the African American population, or the churches, were infiltrated as early as the 1930s with communism. But when the communists first came, they said, no, thank you. We're Christians. But then when they brought in biblical social justice, or social justice through a biblical lens, they got them. And that's hard. And I've had that conversation with multiple pastors. And the first time I like the proof of bringing them along, it's a challenge. It's invigorating, but it's also really, really stressful, because if you have somebody who's so dug in, it can become dangerous.
Yeah.
And that is a hard thing in the work that so many people do, is that being a truth teller is dangerous. At the beginning, you said, I'm not Socrates. You know, what happened to him?
They killed him for asking questions.
Yes, they killed him for asking questions.
Yeah.
So I just want to look at some of the notes. I've got, hello, somebody said my name. Yes, it's carob, just like imitation chocolate. It is what it is. But there's another story to it. I highly recommend looking up what happened after the Holocaust. Because so there's picking your battles. I met a teacher in our area that is very frustrated because the system here is very data driven. She teaches history, and has her kids working on pen and paper.
Yeah,
that's one way. And
for sure.
Yeah. So, and then I'm missing all of these. Yep, yellow done up and mixed. I'm missing some context. I'm so sorry, but so. Tell me about Patterdox when you are, is it for all ages? What is it? High school?
Yeah. So I designed it because my background is always with teenagers. So I designed it for teenagers. And then I realized that like the way that when I started going online, I had already been teaching for 12 years. When I started like, you know, my Instagram and podcasting and stuff. And I was kind of like, are adults going to be interested in the way I explain things? Like because my wife was like, you should just talk about this stuff online. was like, I don't think kids, teenagers, that's my area. But then I was like, oh, actually, adults seem to be interested in this. I connected with some really smart people, like name drop, like Peter Boghossian, Eric Weinstein, and people like that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, there's something to this. So then I was like, okay, so that works. But then I'm raising my own kids. And I started to teach the same things I was teaching there and online. I just kind of changed it a little bit, but talked about the same principles to my own kids, who are, my oldest is 11, my middle just turned 9, and then I have a 4-year-old too. So maybe not the 4-year-old, but the 9-year-old sits in on. So I originally made Patterdox for teenagers. So I was thinking like 15, 16 years old. But now, I mean, even my 9-year-old, he was 8, was sitting in on the classes, and it works. So it's really like pre-teen up until, I've like the oldest I think is like 17. So it's a big span of kids that can resonate with what I'm talking about. And I found that that's actually my approach to education is taking complicated ideas and explaining them simply. And that works for adults like that, teenagers like that, older kids, who are 16, 17 like that. Like, just give it to me in a way I can make sense of it, is like a big, like approach that I've always done. And it works for the younger kids too. And I can talk about the Vietnam War or whatever it is, and the 9-year-old gets it and the 16-year-old gets it.
Right.
So it's great.
I mean, we sound like we're cut from similar cloths, because that's how I teach my high school class. And then when I teach, so our history is story of the world.
Okay.
But it's such short lessons. They're like 7-minute lessons. So I'm constantly looking for the common thread, the humanity. Like, what is a dictator? Well, what would a dictator look like today? So if a dictator back then would walk around and would literally, because the kids love it, hack your head off if you didn't believe, well, what do you have left?
Yeah.
And so I'd say, could you stand? And some of my like 5th graders will say, honestly, I would be afraid to stand for the truth out loud, but inside my house, I would be telling the truth to my family. And when you hear
a lot of self-awareness for it, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, when you hear these kids and they're craving this. I think that more people than not see that the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
And that's spans, right? There's so many things that you could say the emperor has no clothes about. But I think that more people than not know it.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Sorry, so it's one of the benefits, because I teach live classes on Tuesday for homeschool families. Then they're all recorded and they're done really well. And I have like a bunch of resources and stuff, cool assignments and projects that I've done throughout my 20 years in the classroom. But one of the benefits, especially of the live classes, is kids can come on, they can ask any questions. There's no questions. I don't think, especially to young people, like there should be nothing that's off limits to be curious about. So they could ask a problem that's very problematic that would get them in trouble for asking the question in regular school. And like I've had kids, I had a kid talk about, he's like, I can judge, I can tell if someone's a good person or not by whether or not they're fat. Like, let's go, let's talk about it. And he was like a little scared to say it, but he said it. And I was able to get him just by asking him questions to realize, like, no, you can't. And this is a very deeply flawed way to think. But I didn't shame him.
Right.
I was like, okay, let's pull that apart. Cool to pull that apart. Like, you have this belief. Do you stand by this belief? Because if you do, it'll stand up. Good ideas stand up to scrutiny. Okay, it's resistance.
Right.
Okay? We're not lifting weights in a space station here. Let's see if they actually hold up. Iron sharpens iron. So just a few questions, and they just start. Oh yeah, no, that's it. Talking about metabolism and differences, blah blah blah, and all kinds of stuff. And they were like, I hadn't thought about that. I was like, right. So what would happen in a regular classroom for that kid, or maybe in a homeschool environment where they can't ask those kinds of questions, is they would ask questions, someone would get offended and say, how dare you do that? And he would never understand. He'd just know bad thinking, as opposed to getting there on their own. Same with like my kids, like we're Jesus household, but I'm not people like, you're indoctrinating our kids. I was like, no, I'm not. I encourage them to ask questions, and I'm teaching them the truth. So the sky is blue, water is wet, Jesus died for your sins. And they go, well, that's indoctrination. If you are allowed to ask a million questions, why is the sky blue? What is the UV, blah, 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 blah. Just keep asking questions. That's the same way we are with the Bible. Right. So like, it's indoctrination kind of by definition is, this is the way it is. Do not ask questions, just follow it. And I don't like that with anything. So I want to have these conversations, and young people need an environment. They need an outlet to be able to do that. So I wanted to provide that. And I was doing it in just like the 4 walls of my classroom, getting 90 kids a year. but there's an element of scale that I was like, I feel uniquely positioned. I think about the parable of the talents, and I'm thinking like, what can I do to get that out to more people that seem to be needing it? I saw the trend growing in homeschool. I didn't know anything about homeschool, but I was like, I think kids need this stuff. So I just got to find the parents and the families that want their kids to be able to, actually critically think, even if it goes against what they think, but I want my kids to actually think. And that's like what I was able to provide, because I didn't see a whole lot of that really going on to support the homeschool communities. But I thought about a lot about the parable of the talents, and like trying to use my talents to serve as many people as I can.
Well, now is absolutely the time, and I'm happy to share your info with You Hope and other groups out here that are doing advocacy for homeschool families. I have one question for you.
Oh.
Did your relationship with Christ, did that strengthen as you became more, I don't know, as more classical liberal and less left?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've actually become more, even those in the past, because I accepted Jesus, got baptized on my 40th birthday, which was 2022. So
Okay.
I'm more like 3.5 years. I'm still kind of a baby Christian, but
Yeah.
It was critical thinking that was getting me, the search for truth, psychology, philosophy, all blah, 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 blah. And then trying to prove Christianity wrong through the new atheist movement, Sam Harris and Dawkins, blah, blah. And then it was a very like C.S. Lewis, Lee Strobel approach.
Right.
And then I went the other direction. And I was like, oh, this is true.
Well, that seems to happen so often. I mean, even James Lindsay will say, I'm more agnostic now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I talked to him about that a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was like, so what's going on with you with faith? He's like, it's a really long story. I was like,
well, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I spent years in my 20s being agnostic because my school, I went to a fine arts school, performing arts school, and they were like, yeah, there's no room for Christ here. And I was like, well, I want a future, so okay. But the more and more things play out biblically to biblical proportions, I'm like, there's got to be truth here. Plus, more than that, in the crazy world that we fight, there's peace there. That's what I feel.
100%. It helps me in so many ways, but I think politically, I've leaned more, I think, like conservative, even, which I never would have thought. I never voted for a Republican. First time I ever voted for a Republican for president was this past year, and it was very reluctant for Donald Trump. It was a long story about why I made that decision, because I was like, I will never vote for this guy. And then I was like, voted like third party before that. But regardless, and a lot of it would be like the abortion issue, and it's like, it was so clearly pro, like, how could you ever be pro-life? You're so crazy. And then it gets like really tricky, but I still wrestle with like, if you make it illegal, people are going to do it anyway. I don't know if prohibition is the right way. Like from a moral standpoint, I'm very clear. I've had 2 abortion doctors on my podcast, and I got them to admit that it's like missing the mark. By definition, that's a sin, that like, it's not the ideal. But also so I'd like legally, like morally, it's very clear, but then legally, I'm a little bit more fuzzy, but I just have shifted more in like what would be considered like a conservative direction because of my faith, I would say.
Yeah, it's funny to me because they'll use that term, or my favorite thing is what Hillary Clinton just recently came out and said about Christians, and that, you're not a real Christian if you're not her kind of Christian. And I just thought, oh, honey, that's all I've got for you. Honey.
I have issues with the way that some Christians treat people, like people in the trans community, treat people like the harsh judgment, the hypocrisy, all of that kind of stuff. I think it's very clear. Like a lot of Jesus was the most harsh toward these religious leaders. Like I see that a lot, but I do not. I try very hard. I shouldn't say I do, but I try very hard not to say like, you're not a real Christian. Like that's like, what is that? Who am I to make that call? That's not my call.
Well,
I just call us up to say like, hey, here's a cool thing that I do, actually, Carrie, is like, if you and I disagree on something, I say, what scripture is guiding you in your beliefs and your decisions? And then I say what scripture is guiding me. And then what we can do is we can have a conversation about scripture. And that's like a higher level of conversation you can have with other Christians. And I think that's a better approach than saying like, you're not a Christian. I just throw scripture at like Matt Walsh when he's being harsh toward Dylan Mulvaney, throw scripture at him and say like, what scripture is leading you to call this person a disgusting, deep fake human being? Show me the scripture that supports that, you know?
I can agree and also disagree, because I do think that there are points that the Bible makes extremely clear. And I mean, there's the verse that says, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, and I will tell you, I never knew you. And I do personally, I find progressive Christianity to be an affront and a mockery. When you're changing God to be something that is either cozy, I mean, Christ isn't cozy. And when people will say, you know, he sat with the sinners. Yes, he did. He did.
Sin no more, though.
He always had that part. You know, he sat to teach.
Yeah.
And so when people use that to manipulate, you know, the Bible talks about God being a God of order. And when people say anything, literally anything is judgmental, I think Logan Lansing's book really opened up my eyes to how far anything goes with his queering of the American child. Anything is so far down the road. You know, these kids who are standing out there going, love is love. And I said this last week, so I'm sorry if anybody's hearing it again. But the kids who are standing saying love is love, they're not going to be, if you said, okay, no, go advocate that you can marry your own father. The kids would be like, that's disgusting. I'm not doing that. But as they take little by little by little, and they're boiled more and more, and they're convinced that anything is judgmental, then I think you can say that is not Christian. I think there is a point where you can call that out and say, those are not Christian behaviors.
Christian values,
right? I cannot say who is saved, and I am not a person who believes once saved, always saved. I think you can absolutely throw away your faith. I mean, what do they call it? I mean, it's regularly called deconstructing, right? And I think that many people who deconstruct, the funniest and saddest trend I see of people who deconstruct is they deconstruct, they leave their spouse, they become attracted to the opposite sex.
I've seen that a lot. Yeah.
And you're just like, so at that point I go, probably was never rooted in faith to begin with. And so it becomes complicated. But my verse that makes me hold that, you know, and it's funny, I don't usually go into a whole lot of religion when I'm interviewing people, but the verse that makes me hold that is that, and it's the same thing when people say that I can't believe in a cruel God. God is not willing that any should perish.
Yeah.
So I can't believe that some people were sent here and they're select, and other people never had a flying chance. Because I believe that you've got a chance.
You're not Calvinist
until you don't, right? I mean, that's where I fall. Now I do like John MacArthur. I like to listen to him, but I, on that line, and maybe that's my female empathy, but on that line, I just go, no. Because the work that I do ultimately is about being fishers of men or women. And I'm not going to believe that there's some people that can't be reached. Now, I do believe that there's some people that I'm not going to reach. Like I said, there are people that I'm just like, do not cast your pearls before swine.
Yeah. Oh, you and I are so aligned in that. Like, I think of myself as a fisherman, and because I got to it through critical thinking, that it's all about just like getting to those people who are too logical, and it's like it's all about searching for truth. So I kind of backdoor my way into getting them, you know, into my boat by saying like, let's just search for truth. And I do believe, because I follow this, and so many people that I know, Joe Rogan's a good example. Okay, now I'm not saying he's like a Christian or saved, he's accepted Jesus, but he's moved in that direction pretty considerably, and it's because he's just searching for truth. So I think that if you search for truth, and I teach that, you know, U.S. history, civics, economics, all are secular, but it still is through this lens of like, let's figure out the world. And if you're doing that, you'll eventually just get to hard sciences, soft sciences. Like you're going to get down to the bottom. You're going to go, oh, he's the way, the truth, and life. I do believe that, but I don't need to say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus in all my classes, because I'm trying to become a fisher of men, of people who, if I say, it's like Christian songs. You know, you listen to Jelly Roll and Brandon Lake, it's just a fire song, and then it's like, oh, it's a Christian song. You know what I mean? But like, it has to be good first, you know. So it has to be good education, and then good education, like I think, will lead you to the truth, and truth will lead you to Christ. You know. So, but I don't. It doesn't have to be like a.
I think it's the reason he says I am the truth.
Christian platform on its nose. It's not.
No. I think that's the reason that he says that I am the truth.
Yeah.
And it's something that once you have it, you are rooted. This is why so much, whether it's especially education, but also government, holy crap, the amount of legislative bills that are coming through, and you're just like, you really want control over everything, don't you? And yes, because then, especially if you move towards socialism, the state becomes your god. So really, and I think I'll leave it here, but really everything is religious or spiritual, or else another way of putting it, I think it might be C.S. Lewis, but I'm not sure. So we're all born to worship.
Yeah.
All of us are born to worship. And so we worship something. So you may feel, you're watching this going, oh, the end got a little too this. But the reality is that we all worship something, whether that's TikTok, whether that's our wealth and our social, whatever, whether that's the cult that is Randy Weingarten and Becky Pringle and everything that they push. Because I promise you, what we're looking at with them historically looks like a lot of death.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. It doesn't look like uncomfortable. It looks like death. It looks like imprisonment. It looks like the worst part of history repeating itself.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I'm so glad we finally
talked like all day, right?
Yes, I was like, I kept looking at the clock going, because this little program won't let you download it easily if it's over an hour, but it was still worth it. So thank you so much. I'll send you over some clips, and please send me your information so that I can get that out to the multiple.
I would love that. I want to be used. I want to be used by the homeschool community, especially. I know what I got, and I know how it's helped the people that are in it, and I want to try and get it to as many families and help them as possible. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been lovely. Have a great day.
All right, see you, Carrie.
Bye-bye.